She was respected. She had everything: books, awards, and love. Or so she thought, until one afternoon, she opened the wrong email, and her world quietly broke. This is a story of Dr. Amelia Clarke, a woman who walked away from betrayal and found peace in a forgotten garden. Stay with us. This story will help you learn English and remind you that sometimes the best beginnings start after an ending. Let's begin. Dr. Amelia Clarke was known in Oxford as one of the most brilliant minds in literature. Her lectures were packed. Her books were cited in academic journals. Students admired her. Colleagues respected her. She had spent more than a decade building her career. Paper by paper, book by book, seminar by seminar. But despite her calm, composed appearance, Amelia had built much of her life around one person, Thomas Whitmore. He was also a professor at Oxford, charming and intelligent, with a deep voice and eyes that always seemed to know the right answer. They had been together for 7 years. They shared ideas, dinners, and dreams of retiring in Italy one day. Everyone said they were a perfect match, until one Thursday afternoon changed everything. Amelia was in the English department office printing lecture notes when she passed by Thomas's room. The door was slightly open, and she heard laughter, young and familiar. Curious, she peeked in. There was Thomas, and beside him sat Lydia, one of his students. Lydia was brilliant, confident, and only 24. Thomas wasn't doing anything wrong. Not exactly. But the way he looked at Lydia, the way he gently touched her hand when she laughed, it was too familiar, too intimate. Later that day, Amelia found emails, dozens of them. Some were strictly academic. Others were not. You challenged me in ways I didn't expect. Talking to you makes the world quieter. Amelia felt the world around her tilt. She didn't confront him immediately. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She packed a small suitcase, left a short note, and drove 2 hours into countryside to a small stone cottage that had once belonged to her grandmother. The cottage stood at the edge of a sleepy village, surrounded by hills and meadows. Amelia hadn't visited it in years. It smelled of dust and roses. Her grandmother had loved roses. The garden was overgrown now, wild, tangled, full of weeds. The lavender bushes had stretched across the stone path, and the rose vines were dry and thorny. Amelia sat on the porch with a cup of tea and stared at the mess. "This is what I feel like," she whispered. "Overgrown, untouched, forgotten." The next day, she picked up a rusty pair of garden shears and began to work. She cut vines, pulled weeds, dug her hands into the soil. Her back ached. Her fingers bled. But for the first time in weeks, her mind was quiet. Each morning, Amelia rose early. She made tea, put on gloves, and stepped into the garden. It was slow work. Some days she cried while pruning. Other days she hummed her grandmother's favorite songs. By the end of the second week, the garden began to show life again. Little green buds, a few bright flowers, a sign of hope. One afternoon, she went into town to buy new seeds. At the garden center, she wandered the aisles, lost in Latin names and flower colors. Looking for something special? A voice asked. She turned and saw a man in his 40s, with soft eyes and dirt under his nails. He wore a simple jacket and had a small notebook in his hand. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm just trying to bring an old garden back to life. He smiled. That's a noble cause. I'm Edward. I run the local greenhouse. I'm Amelia, she said. Well, Amelia, Edward said, if you ever need advice, come by. My place is just down the road. She didn't go immediately. She still felt too raw, too broken. But the following week, after her tomato plants withered, she walked to Edward's greenhouse. It was filled with light, warmth, and 1,000 shades of green. Edward greeted her like an old friend. He showed her which soil to use, how much water, where to plant in the shade. They talked for over an hour about gardening, literature, and favorite childhood memories. He didn't ask personal questions. He didn't pry. He simply listened when she spoke and smiled when she didn't. Over the next month, Edward stopped by her cottage with new seeds or tools. Sometimes he stayed for tea. Sometimes they worked side by side in silence. Amelia began to feel lighter, stronger. One morning, while planting wildflowers, Amelia finally spoke of Thomas. He chose someone younger, she said quietly, someone he could impress. Edward didn't interrupt. I was humiliated, she continued. Everyone at the university knew. And I felt old, used, left behind. Edward looked at her. You weren't left behind. You chose to walk away. There's power in that. Amelia blinked. No one had said it like that before. As the garden bloomed, so did she. Her cheeks were rosier. Her laughter came easier. She started writing again, not academic papers, but poetry, short stories. She wrote about flowers that grew in broken soil, about women who built new lives with calloused hands and quiet hearts. She submitted a short story to a literary magazine under a pen name. It was published a month later. Her old life in Oxford felt far away. One afternoon in early autumn, Thomas arrived at the cottage. Amelia was trimming roses when she heard a car. She turned and saw him walking toward her. I had to see you, he said. She stood still. I made a mistake, he continued. Lydia, it was a moment of weakness. I miss you. We were good together. Amelia. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. I'm not the same person anymore, she said. You broke something, and maybe it was already cracked, but I don't want to fix it. He looked confused. We could try again. Amelia shook her head. I'm not trying anymore. I'm living. Thomas left, and Amelia returned to her roses. That evening, she wrote in her journal, he came back, thinking I would too, but I have grown roots here, and they are strong. Winter came with frost and silence. The garden slept, but inside the cottage, Amelia baked bread, read books by the fire, and planned next season's planting. Edward visited often. They played chess, shared wine, talked about everything, and sometimes nothing. One snowy evening, he brought her a gift, a single tulip bulb in a small glass jar. For your window, he said. It will bloom even in winter. She smiled. Like me? By spring, Amelia decided to return to Oxford part-time. She would teach one seminar per week, but keep her cottage and garden. She no longer needed titles or full schedules to feel important. She had her books, her garden, and her peace. And Edward, their love didn't arrive like a storm. It came gently, like rain on thirsty ground. They didn't call it love immediately. But one day, while planting sunflowers. He kissed her. It felt right. Quiet, safe, real. A year later, Amelia's garden was featured in a local magazine. The writer asked her what inspired her to restore it. She smiled and said, "I lost myself once, but in the dirt and the silence, I found a new version of me, one that blooms." If you like this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional English stories. Thank you for watching.